Bright Duty. Every student matters.
Hello dear students, welcome to another lecture, and in today's class we are going to begin with the 7th chapter of your book, which is Macbeth. Now we all know what a brilliant writer William Shakespeare was. I don't think there's any one of us who has not heard about him, who has not read him. And this story that we are going to read today is another brilliant, writings of William Shakespeare. Now, as the name suggests, this story is about a man whose name was Macbeth. So the story revolves around him, his selfish and cruel intentions, and most importantly, the fact that the desire, the aim, that a person has within himself or herself to be at the top, can at times make you do things which are not appropriate for you. So, at times we are so much driven by our selfish nature, by our selfish intentions, that we do not realize how bad or how cruel or how evil we end up becoming because of that. Same was the case with Macbeth. He wanted to be the ruler. He wanted to be the king. And with an aim to be the king, what all things did he do? And the ultimate aim of somebody who's wrong is obviously bad. So this is something that this story teaches us. I am sure you're going to enjoy reading this story as much as I do. And obviously we learn a lot of things from this story as well. So without wasting much time, let us start reading. When Duncan reigned king of Scotland, there lived a valiant lord called Macbeth. Macbeth was a close relative of the king. He was greatly respected for his heroism, especially because he had lately defeated a rebel army assisted by the troops of Norway. So, the King of Scotland, the story that we are reading, at that time, the King of Scotland was Duncan. So, he reigned. Reigned means ruled. So, Duncan ruled Scotland. He was the King of Scotland at that time. And there lived a valiant lord. Valiant means very brave, very strong. So there was a very brave lord, one of the people of his army. And his name was Macbeth. Macbeth was a close relative of the king. So this person, Macbeth, who has been described as very brave and very strong, was a very close relative of the king. He was greatly respected for his heroism, especially because he had lately defeated a rebel army assisted by the troops of Norway. So, he was respected by one and all because of his heroic aspect. So, he was a hero. He was respected by everyone, and especially because lately means in the recent days, he had defeated a rebel army. Rebel, somebody who's on the opposite side. So there was an army who was fighting against Scotland. So Macbeth defeated this army, and especially because this army that was against Scotland was assisted by the troops of Norway. So Norway, again, we know is a name of a place. So these troops of Norway, they were assisting this army, and Macbeth, being so brave as we have been told, he actually defeated this army. The two Scottish generals, Macbeth and Banquo, were returning victorious from this great battle. On their way, they were stopped by the strange appearance of three figures like women, except that they had beards, and their withered skins and wild attire made them look not like any earthly creatures. When Macbeth first addressed them, They were seemingly offended, but later the first of them saluted Macbeth. She called him the Thane of Cawdor. The second gave him the title of the Thane of Cawdor, and the third said to him, "All hail, that you shall be king thereafter." So, these two Scottish generals, so like I told you, these are the people who worked in the Scottish army, that Scottish army which was ruled by Duncan. So, the two men, Macbeth and Banquo, they were returning victorious from this great battle. So, this battle that Scotland fought against that troop, Macbeth and Banquo were returning from this battle. On their way, they were stopped by the strange appearance of three figures. So, when they were coming home, on the way they came across three women-like creatures who were very strange looking. They looked very strange, except that they had beards. So, they were women, but they had beard. And their withered skins and wild attire make them look not like any earthly creatures. So they were women, they had beard, they had withered skin, very dry skin they had, and their attire, their clothes were very wild. So looking at this physical appearance, Macbeth felt that these creatures that he had come across did not look earthly to him. Earthly means they were ghostly. So the opposite of earthly is ghostly. So they looked like ghosts to him. When Macbeth first addressed them, they were seemingly offended. So when Macbeth started talking to them at first, these creatures were offended. They felt insulted, they felt bad. But later, the first of them saluted Macbeth. So at first, these three creatures felt insulted, but later on, one of them saluted Macbeth. She called him the Thane of Cawdor. Thane is a title which is given to basically a warrior. Okay, so a person who holds a very important place in the army. So that person is given the title of Thane, and Glamis is the name of the place, Cawdor is the name of the place. So the first creature, the first ghost rather, gave Macbeth the title Thane of Cawdor. The second gave him the title of Thane of Cawdor. And the third said to him, "All hail." All hail means everybody will welcome you, that you shall be king hereafter. Now onwards, you are going to be the king of Scotland. So this is what the three ghosts or the three witches predicted or prophesied about Macbeth. Macbeth was amazed by this prophecy because the king's sons would succeed him to the throne. Now, when Macbeth heard this prophecy, he was obviously amazed. He was shocked. He was surprised. Prophecy means a prediction for somebody's future. So, the future prediction which is made for someone, that is a prophecy. So, Macbeth was very surprised when he heard this because the king had two sons. And if something happens to the father, it is obviously the sons who are going to get his throne. So, succeed means the sons are going to get the throne after their father. So, Macbeth was nowhere in the picture. These creatures then turned to Banquo. To him, they said that though he should never reign, yet his sons would be kings in Scotland. They then turned into air and vanished. At once the general knew that they were witches. So these three creatures, after prophesying about Macbeth, after predicting about Macbeth, they turned towards Banquo, who was with Macbeth at that time. To him, the three creatures said that though he should never reign, that the chances for you to rule Scotland are very, very less. You would never get a chance to be the king of Scotland, but your sons would be the kings in Scotland. So though you will never be the king, but your sons surely will be the kings of Scotland. They then turned into the air and vanished. So then these three creatures suddenly vanished. They disappeared into the air. And it is then that Macbeth and Banquo realized that they were witches, that they were the ghosts actually. While they stood pondering on the strange happenings, a few messengers arrived with a message from the king. The king had conferred upon Macbeth the dignity of Thane of Cawdor. This event miraculously corresponded with the prediction of the witches. Macbeth was both astonished and happy, hoping that one day he would rule Scotland. So, while Macbeth and Banquo, they stood there pondering. Pondering means thinking. So, they both were thinking about the strange things that were happening with them. A few messengers arrived with a message from king. So this is something that we all know, that the kings have messengers. These are those people who convey the king's message or instruction from one place to the other. So the king's messengers arrived and they had a message from the king for Macbeth. The king had conferred upon Macbeth. Conferred means to offer with respect. So with huge respect, with dignity, dignity again means respect. So the king had offered Macbeth the title of Thane of Cawdor. Now this event, the king conferring Macbeth with the title of Thane of Cawdor, this miraculously corresponded. Corresponded means happening at the same time, and miraculously means in a magical way. So, just now the witches had predicted something like this for Macbeth. Thane of Cawdor was one of the titles that the second witch had given to Macbeth. And now Macbeth was actually given the same title by the king. So when he heard that, Macbeth was shocked, he was astonished, and he was happy, hoping that one day he would rule Scotland. So now he thought that because one of the predictions of the witches has come true, he's been given the title of Thane of Cawdor, he will be ruling the country, ruling Scotland soon. Turning to Banquo, he said, "Do you not hope that your children shall be kings? When what the witches promised to me has so wonderfully come true?" So, Macbeth asked Banquo that, do you hope, do you want, do you wish that your children might also become the kings of Scotland one day? Because the witches had predicted something for me that has come true, and they had predicted for your sons to be the king as well. So are you not hopeful that that might also come true? "That might raise a hope in you," answered the general. "But often these supernatural creatures deceive us and lead us to wrong." So, the general said that this might raise a hope in you. Listening to the witches and believing in them might have made you hopeful about becoming a king. But often there are chances that the supernatural, something that does not belong to the earth, okay, ghostly. So he said that very often these supernatural creatures actually deceive us, they leave us, they cheat us, and they lead us to do wrong. And because of them, we take the wrong path at times. But the wicked suggestions of the witches had sunk too deep into the mind of Macbeth. He did not pay attention to the warnings of the good Banquo. He started making plans to ascend to the throne of Scotland. So, the wicked suggestions, the cruel, bad. So, the suggestions that the witches had given to Macbeth had sunk too deep in his mind. So, those suggestions had actually taken a toll over Macbeth's mind. They had, actually subsided him a lot, had dominated him, and he did not pay any attention to the warnings of the good Banquo. So we have been told with this line that Banquo was a good person, because that is the adjective which is used for Banquo. So he did not pay any attention to what Banquo warned him. He started making plans to ascend to the throne of Scotland. On the other hand, Macbeth started planning that how is he going to ascend. Ascend means to get on something. So, ascend and descend, as kids we had done this, ascending order and descending order in mathematics. So, ascend to the throne of Scotland means to get on the throne of Scotland. Macbeth also told the strange prediction of the witches to his wife. She was a very ambitious woman and harbored the desire to be the queen. She not only encouraged Macbeth but also suggested he murder the king, if necessary, to fulfill the prophecy. So, Macbeth went back home and he told this strange prediction of the witches to his wife. So, whatever prediction the witches had done, Macbeth told them to his wife. She was very ambitious, so she also harbored the desire to be the queen. Harbored means secretly, to secretly have something in you. So secretly, even she wanted to be the queen. She not only encouraged Macbeth, but also suggested he murder the king. So, not only was she very encouraging, not only did she tell Macbeth that yes, you can be the next king of Scotland, but she also told him that if it is required, you should kill the king so that you can be the king now, so that the prophecy, the prediction of the witches come true. It happened then that the king came to Macbeth's house with his two sons, Malcolm and Donalbain, and numerous attendants to honor Macbeth for his victory in wars. The king entered Macbeth's beautiful castle. He was warmly welcomed by the treacherous hostess, Lady Macbeth, who had the art of covering her evil intention with smiles, could look like the innocent flower while she was indeed serpent under it. So, coincidentally, the king came to Macbeth's house with his two sons. So, the names of the two sons of the king were Malcolm and Donalbain. So, the king along with his two sons and numerous and multiple attendants, multiple other people of his court, they came to Macbeth's house in order to honor him, in order to give him respect for being victorious in the wars, for bringing victory to Scotland. He had come there so that he could give respect to him, he could honor him. The king entered Macbeth's beautiful castle. Castle, we all know, a beautiful, palace. So even Macbeth had a beautiful castle, and the king, along with his sons and his attendants, entered the castle. He was warmly welcomed by the treacherous hostess, Lady Macbeth. Just see the irony in the situation. Warmly welcomed. We usually use the expression warmly welcomed for somebody who welcomes you inside the house with a lot of love, with a lot of affection. So these people were welcomed in the house by the treacherous hostess. Treacherous, dangerous. So hostess is the opposite, the feminine gender of host. So Lady Macbeth, that is the wife of Macbeth, welcomed them into her castle. She had the art of covering her evil intention with smiles. The writer tells us that Lady Macbeth was so smart and so clever and cunning that she could actually hide her evil intentions, bad intentions, wishes, desires. So she could actually hide her bad desires with the help of her smiles. She could look like the innocent flower while she was indeed serpent under it. Serpent, snake. So this lady was so talented that despite being a snake inside, she could look like a flower on the face. So this is how sweet she could seem to the people. The king, being tired with his journey, went early to bed. He had been unusually pleased with his welcome. He sent presents to his officers and a diamond to Lady Macbeth for being the most kind hostess. So the king obviously was very tired with his journey, so he slept early. He was unusually pleased, happy. So he was very, very happy with the kind of welcome that he got at Macbeth's house. He sent presents to his officers. So all the officers who had actually won that battle for him, he sent presents to his officers. And for Lady Macbeth, he actually sent a diamond. And why did he send a diamond for Lady Macbeth? Because she was, according to him, the most kind hostess. So she was the kindest hostess he had ever come across in his life, and thus he presented her with a diamond. In the middle of night, Lady Macbeth decided to murder the king. She would not have done so, but she knew that her husband was an ambitious man but too kind to murder. So, armed with a dagger, she approached the king's bed. Duncan was sleeping soundly after the fatigue of his journey. Lady Macbeth felt something in his face resembled her own father and did not have the courage to proceed. So you see, in the middle of the night, Lady Macbeth, she actually decided to murder the king herself. She would not have done so, so she did not want to kill anyone, but she knew that her husband was an ambitious man. For sure, he wanted to be a king. He was, very, very ambitious. He wanted to reach success, but he was too kind to be a murderer. He just could not think of murdering anyone. So, armed with a dagger, dagger is, a bigger knife which is actually used for this purpose only. So she took a dagger in her hand and she went near Duncan's bed. Duncan was sleeping soundly. So Duncan was having a very peaceful sleep after the fatigue of his journey. Fatigue, the tiredness. So he was tired because of his journey, and that is why he was sleeping peacefully. Lady Macbeth felt something in his face resembled her own father. So Lady Macbeth looked at Duncan and she felt that there was something in Duncan's face that actually looked like her own father. And therefore, she just could not have, gathered the courage to proceed. So she did not have the courage to proceed further, to kill this man. She returned to discuss with her husband. Macbeth was reluctant to murder Duncan. He gave strong reasons. Firstly, he was a close relative of the king, and as his host, it was his duty that day to protect him. Moreover, Duncan was a just and merciful king who was loved by his subjects. Thus, the subjects were bound to revenge his death. Besides, because Macbeth was loved by the king, all honored him. A murder would tarnish his reputation. So, since she could not kill Duncan, she returned back and she thought of discussing the same with her husband. Macbeth was reluctant to murder Duncan. Reluctant, unwilling. He did not want to murder Duncan. He gave strong reasons, for the same. He told his wife that first, he was a close relative of the king. And as his host, it was his duty that day to protect him. So the first reason that Macbeth gave to his wife in order to tell her not to kill Duncan that day was that he was a close relative of Duncan. Besides, that day, he was Duncan's host. Duncan was staying at their place. So it was their responsibility not to do anything to Duncan, to keep him safe and protected that day. Moreover, Duncan was a just and merciful king who was loved by his subjects. Just somebody who's always right, who believes in doing the right thing with the people. And he was full of mercy, he was full of love and compassion for his subjects, the people who were under him. They always got his love and affection. Thus the subjects were bound to revenge his death. So he thought that if these subjects will get to know that it was Macbeth who had killed Duncan, they are surely going to take revenge from Duncan for, they are going to take revenge from Macbeth for Duncan's death. Besides, because Macbeth was loved by the king, all honored him. A murder would tarnish his reputation. He also said that Macbeth, he himself was loved by the king dearly, and that is why everybody honored him, everybody respected him. If he is going to murder the king, his reputation, his position is going to be tarnished. It is going to be badly affected. So a murder is going to badly affect the reputation of Macbeth, and this is what he told his wife. But Lady Macbeth was not easily shaken from his evil purpose. She poisoned her husband's ears. She said it was a very easy deed. Once done, he would rule the country. She even accused Macbeth of fickleness and cowardice. So Lady Macbeth, Macbeth's wife, she was not shaken from her evil purpose. This evil thought that she had in her mind, there was nothing that could sway her, just nothing at all. She was determined, she had decided, and she was going to get that. She poisoned her husband's ears. So she actually poisoned her husband's ears. Poisoning the ears means telling somebody all the bad things, When you're constantly telling somebody all the bad things about someone, then the person is bound to believe them. So she poisoned her husband's ears. She said it was a very easy deed. So according to her, killing the king was something very, very simple. Once done, he would rule the country. She told him that if you kill the king, you are going to be the ruler of the country and then nobody can say anything to you. She even accused Macbeth of fickleness and cowardice. According to her, Macbeth was fickle-minded, somebody who is very unsteady. Somebody who gets swayed away from the decisions that he or she has taken. So, she even blamed. So, she blamed Macbeth for his unsteady behavior and for being a coward, for being this fearful. Once more, Macbeth gathered courage and taking the dagger in his hand, he softly stole into the dark room where Duncan lay. At first he was afraid, but soon getting rid of this fear, he stabbed Duncan to death. So, once more, Macbeth gathered the courage. Gathering is, to get something in yourself. So, he mustered up the courage and taking the dagger in his hand. So, he took that dagger in his hand and softly stole in the dark to the room where Duncan lay. Softly stole in the dark means that very quietly he entered the room where Duncan was sleeping. At first he was afraid, he was scared, but soon he got rid of his fear. He just got away from all the problems and all the fears that he had in himself, and he stabbed Duncan to death. Stabbing with the help of a knife when you kill somebody, that is known as stabbing. So he stabbed Duncan to death. So my dear students, I'm going to pause here. What have we read so far? We've read about Macbeth and Banquo, who were the two very powerful and very valorous generals of Scotland. Scotland that was reigned by Duncan, who had two sons. One night after winning a battle, when Macbeth and Banquo were returning home, they came across three witches. These three witches predicted that Macbeth was going to be the king of Scotland. For Banquo, they predicted that though Banquo would never be able to rule Scotland, but his sons would definitely rule that. This made Macbeth very, very hopeful, especially because exactly then the messengers told him that the king had actually conferred him with the title of Thane of Cawdor. This is what one of the witches had prophesied. He was very happy. He aspired to be the king. Although Banquo tried to warn him that at times these witches, these supernatural things actually force us to do something wrong, but Macbeth was not ready to listen. He came back home, told this to his wife. His wife was equally evil and ambitious. She wanted her husband to be the king, to be the ruler of Scotland, and therefore she encouraged him to kill the king if the need be. Now, coincidentally, the same night, the king, along with his two sons and a lot of attendants, came to Macbeth's castle. He had come there to give him presents for the victorious battle that they had won. When they were sleeping, Lady Macbeth had gone to Duncan's room to kill him, but she could not because his face resembled like her own father. But she provoked Macbeth to do the same, and Macbeth thus entered Duncan's chamber and killed him to death. So what happened later on, we are going to read in the next part of our video. So my dear students, I'll see you all now in my next lecture. Thank you so much.